And yet I started going like, no, I'm going to act a different way. That's it. And it's, some people go, oh, that's hypocritical. And I go, no, what I was doing was hypocritical. What I was doing was hypocritical. Why? Because he always gives me a way. He always gives me a way to be able to walk in the ways of the kingdom. Always. He's not handcuffing me. And so I'm sitting there going like, oh no, it's actually probably more honest and authentic to be able to act my way into a new way of thinking, more than trying to sit around and try to read books about it continually, or, you know, right. And I love reading books, but that's just not how that stuff works typically.
Wow. So when you hook up with Jeff, and he starts mentioning, you're like 19 years old?
Yeah, 19. Mm-hmm.
So how long is it? Because you mentioned that you started talking to him about college.
Yeah.
So how long were you just there working in the foundry until, like, did you end up going to school?
Yeah. So I went to, which that was definitely a shock to the system. So I was raised more, I was raised in a really cool community. It was an predominantly African-American community, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But then I went to this small, rural, very, very white, which is great too. White people are awesome. I think I am one. But small school in Missouri and stuff. So it was, that was an interesting time for me as well too, because it's like, I'm there for the first week and super disoriented. And I had like, definitely several earthy thoughts that I let Jeff know of how I didn't really like it there. And
what was it about it that you didn't like?
Everything, pretty much. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It was really difficult at first. It just wasn't something that I was used to. People were there were beautiful and awesome, and I ended up loving it. I did. It ended up being a great place. I still have lifelong friends from there. But the only thing that Jeff told me is, he said, pray and be humble. I was like, all right, I guess I'll do it. You know? And then the second thing he told me, which was brilliant as well, before I took off, he said, hey man, you're going to go to a church. And he said, you're going to ask around, and you're going to ask who the oldest, wisest guy is. And you're going to go tell him to mentor you. It's like, okay, sounds good. I'll do that. You know? And so I go to this, like, it was like a dying Baptist church. And I walk in there and I find the oldest guy, and everybody was like, oh yeah, he's definitely the wisest guy. And he had actually been a missionary in Ethiopia for years, and then he was a professor retired professor at the university. His name's Ted Mansky. And so I go up to Ted and I was like, hey, I hear you're the oldest, wisest guy that's here. And he's like, you know, and so laughing. And I said, so you're going to mentor me, because that's what my mentor told me. And, but Jeff already prepared me too. Jeff goes, hey, most of these guys don't necessarily think they have a whole lot to offer. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell him he's still going to do it. And so Ted, Mr. Mansky says, I asked him if he'll mentor me, you know, and stuff. And lo and behold, he was just like, I don't know that I got a whole lot to give you. And I go, so is that going to be coffee or a lunch? And so anyways, dude, he goes, just come over to my house. So I show up to his house, and at the time, like, his body was starting to give out and things like that. But he kind of waddles to the door, you know, and his wife, she's a short lady, her name's Marion. And he comes to the door and he goes, come on in and park your bones. And so I'm like, all right, park your bones. And so I sit in this chair, and all of a sudden he just takes a Bible and he just throws it open. And his Bible's like tattered. And he just starts reading in the scripture. And it'd lead him to one of two things. In this unbelievable story, or he would sing the worst hymn that I've ever heard in my life. Like, his voice is awful. Like, so terrible. And but then I remember this one time, like, he when he would have to go use the restroom, it'd be the restroom would be for quite a while just because of his age and things like that. So I'm sitting there, and his wife pulls me off to the side, and she goes, "Come and look at this." She takes me to this back room, and he has these bookshelves of just tattered Bibles that she had kept. I mean, they were trashed. And she looks up at me and she goes, "If you ever want to be a man like my Teddy," she points at that and she goes, "You could go sit back down, Vernon."
Wow.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
And it was beautiful. It was beautiful, you know. And so there's so many of these things that people, I believe, are making so complicated. When at the end of the day, it's going like, no, seek connection with people that are older and wiser than you. Don't overcomplicate this thing. And walk with him daily. That's what it is.
So what was it that you went to school for?
Yeah, so I first started off as a Bible major, and that did not go well. So welcome.
Really?
So yeah, for sure. And it wasn't as much from the professors. It was more, there was just this profound sense of legalism in the Bible world, like with the Bible majors at the time and stuff. And I didn't really want to be around that a whole lot, you know, and stuff. And so anyways, I went there for a couple years. Then I stopped going, and I ended up coming down to Houston's First Baptist Church, and I was working in their missions department for a little while and stuff. Anyways, formal education-wise, I ended up getting my undergrad from Southwestern in Fort Worth, and then I got a master's and PhD at a school in Ireland in history of ideas. And so my master's dissertation was on eco-justice, so a biblical approach to the redemption of ecology. And then my PhD dissertation was on biblical lament and poetry. And then I'm getting another doctorate right now, doctorate in ministry, and focusing on lament as well.
So did you actually go to Ireland?
No, I did it all. We did it distance.
Okay.
Yeah, correct.
All right.
Correct.
And so what leads you to focus on lament? What drew you to that area of study?
Yeah, great question. So I think that after I became a Christian, and I wouldn't have been able to put it in these words right then, but right after I became a Christian, I started going to a church, and it was whenever there was something that was difficult or painful, somehow it needed to resolve to praise. And it never sat well with me. And I was just like, this is like messed up. Like there's no ability to even like grieve, or you can grieve for a short period of time, but then all of a sudden you have to like quickly run to praise, you know? And so as I started to just think through that and experience it through life, I actually think that like my studies in biblical lament were part of the release valve to break some of my depression. And again, there were other things that I ended up doing and stuff like therapy-wise, dietary-wise, body movement-wise, that I think are all super important because, again, we're whole body beings, and that's important. But as I started to study lament and going, oh, we've made a God out of praise instead of a God out of God. And whenever I started doing my studies and I realized, oh my gosh, there wasn't one word of praise on the mouth of Jesus on the cross, not one. And yet he lived in perfect faith. So the idea is sitting there going, if all of life somehow has to resolve into praise, Jesus was a sinner on the cross. So it's not a minor miss. And so I think that kind of opened up a whole lot of things for me, and then even again, just being more like what Jeff had just taught me early on of just like immerse yourself in the scriptures, immerse yourself. And I just kept seeing all throughout the scriptures, like all of these times where things didn't inherently resolve into praise, like Psalm 88, perfect one, where there's an Old Testament theologian, Walter Brueggemann. He says, Psalm 88 is an embarrassment to conventional faith. And like, that's so beautiful. And it's because it doesn't resolve to praise. And in fact, the very last line of Psalm 88 is, darkness is my only friend. And I mean, you think about this and you go, oh no, these Psalms, they were sung in the community. Everybody sang these. And the reason why you sing that is so that the community can also help you bear the burden. That's why you do it. I was given a recent lecture, and I even talked through the idea of Psalm 137, and so the imprecatory Psalms are like better known as kind of like the violence Psalms and things like that. Psalm 137, the whole context is, the captors are looking at the people of God and saying, sing us a song, about your God.